I've, watched a number of documentaries related to the development of shale gas and oil and found them really interesting, and there's lots of good ones out there that motivate people, that help to raise awareness, that sometimes have shock value as one of their strategies for engaging others. In the film that you're going to see tonight, Triple Divide, it takes more of an approach like this is the information that we provided to you. These are real experiences, not stories, experiences and information from people that are being impacted, and that you can make your own decision about how this thing should go forward.
I'm Melissa. This is Josh. Hello, everyone. And we are the creators of the documentary Triple Divide and the co-founders of Public Herald, which is an investigative news nonprofit that we started about 6 months after we began production for the film, right?
So 2011, yeah, is when we started.
Cool.
Yeah, so with the film, we tried to answer one basic question, which was how is the state and how is the industry handling the negative impacts from fracking? So as journalists, we went in and tried to pull that data out of the agencies. We looked at the worst case scenario from 2011. We looked at individual complaint cases and how those are being handled. And we looked at the most regulated areas of the state, which are your exceptional value watersheds and your EQ watersheds. So that gave us a good picture of how regulations are playing out, how state regulations are playing out.
Yeah, so. Pennsylvania often boasts about having world-class regulations and the best fracking regulations in the country. So again, we were interested to see if that was true and how it was all playing out.
Well, it's certainly true that Pennsylvania does have some of the best regulations with their clean streams laws, with their 1984 Oil and Gas Act. There's some excellent laws that were written in Pennsylvania by some of the people that you're going to see in the film tonight. The issue, too, is for us just how they're being enforced.
Are there any players out there, any actors of those 6,400 wells that are doing a better job than what you presented on the screen?
Unfortunately, no. So every company is doing essentially what you're seeing in the film because they can't prevent certain problems from happening. I can't really point to one company and say that they're handling a certain group of homeowners better than another. Certain companies do play bias to particular homeowners, right? So there might be a group of homeowners where 8 people's water supplies are contaminated, right? And they might be really, really good to 2 of those people. And then the rest of the 6, they'll just leave in the dust. Okay, this happens over and over again. And I mean, there's a number of reasons of why it might happen, but that's a repeated thing that's been going on. But I can't say, and I don't think Melissa can either, that one company is standing out as being just very, very much a good neighbor, right? We don't have one company where we can say that they are a good neighbor at this point.
I was wondering if you could maybe expound more on what the deal with the DEP is. Why do they seem to be ruling against Pennsylvania victims?
Well, the DEP is a regulatory agency that can only enforce its power to the extent that the real authority in the state, which is the legislature and the governor, yada yada, allow them to, right? So the head of DEP is an appointed position. You know, as a citizen of Pennsylvania, I don't elect who's in charge of the DEP. The governor comes in and they say, okay, this guy's going to be head, and then that guy is, you know, he's working for the governor. You know, first and foremost. Even though his job title is to work for the people, to protect the environment. And right now, the political will in Pennsylvania is to support and work with the industry and make money. There's been a massive suppression of information and a suppression within the department of its own people. So we've talked to a lot of DEP field staff who are really smart and want to do a good job, but they're being prevented from doing their job, essentially, in order to keep their job, if that makes sense.
It has a lot to do with the people being hired, right? I mean, some of these people being hired just are not really qualified to be working with people with homeowner complaints.
The new people, I mean, we've seen a major turnover at DEP, too. Since this whole fracking thing came into play, we saw many people who had been at the DEP for a long time, you know, had stayed in past retirement because this is their passion. people who were really, really, really good at enforcing the law, you know, handed a box and said, you know, your position is being terminated, you know, see ya. And then the replacement of those very good people has been with very unqualified people, you know, the first-timers, new into the industry, willing to, you know, with a need to impress and move up the ladder. So there's a lot of incentive to walk the line, more than somebody who's been in for 25 years and actually gives a damn about, you know.
And the senior staff is like just putting a lot of pressure on the staff that might be doing good, right? Staff that might be really doing good field notes, working with the public. The senior staff is essentially setting it up so that these people at DEP act more like a private corporation as opposed to a public agency. So instead of them working close with you to understand your case and it being more of a trust value between you and the department, instead they call the gas agent, the gas company, and then the gas company comes in and then they talk to you with the DEP in the background, right? Or they're right next to the DEP as they talk to you. So the DEP has really become this extra arm of the industry and has sort of privatized itself with the industry, which is a really serious problem. And the collusion there is pretty apparent, but hard to really draw and write in detail. Like it's hard to bring all that stuff into a report and make it clear so that they are reprimanded. Right? I mean, right now they're being investigated, right? So offices across Pennsylvania are investigating the DEP for their moral character.
Other state agencies.
Yeah.
What about independent scientific research, university level? I mean, would it be impossible to form a fund that the landowner or the impacted person could then direct a set amount of fund, $150,000, to do extensive research on this, and then that landowner choose the person who would conduct that research, which could be vetted through their scientific publications and their credibility, instead of funding through competitive bids or proposals that go to like National Science Foundation or Department of Energy, where there may be also at that level a political decision point that, oh, this person is familiar because their background, their father, their brother have industry people. They have a background in that family, which is sometimes could be considered a conflict of interest. I was just wondering where the public could play a role in the decision making about what scientists are actually put onto their task, and then we would actually then.
Well, that's happening.
It
so
is
I don't know if
happening
anybody's
that way.
ever heard of PEPA. Anybody here of PEPA in the room? That's the People's Environmental Protection Agency, or the Public Environmental Protection Agency. This is a grassroots thing that's happening in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, and other states, where people are collectively coming together and working with scientists like Yuri would be definitely qualified for this, or others, and acting as their own regulatory agency, so potentially coming in and issuing fines, issuing violations to companies, ordering injunctions against people at DEP and bringing them into court. So this is like one of the reactions that have happened because of the regulatory shortfalls in Pennsylvania. What's that?
Sure.
It potentially can be very illegal for them to do that. It's just, it's a matter of them getting the right attorney to work with them to hold the gas company accountable for violating the Clean Streams Law or violating the 1984 Oil and Gas Act. So they do have some clout, especially if the private, if the homeowner is willing to let them come on the land, do the testing, and that type of thing. So it's not to say that it's not legal. It's just it's interesting. We don't know what the outcome of it's going to be, but it's in the background. Well, I'm going to grab him because you already asked one.
So here in New York, we're a state that is able to make local laws about zoning that preempt the state law and even are able to preempt federal law. So I'm wondering if there's a local ban movement in Pennsylvania that has any kind of momentum, because there is one here, and I haven't heard much. I'm not very connected with the people in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is. So we have some. You guys have home rule in New York. We have something similar in Pennsylvania. So actually, the Oil and Gas Law, Act 13, that updated our law in 2012, one of the things that glorious law did was to remove the local zoning power that municipalities had to say where this activity took place. Local municipalities weren't allowed to say how it took place. So, for example, they couldn't say, company must use a closed loop system instead of open impoundments. That's a how thing, and communities don't have that jurisdiction. But we, in Pennsylvania, have traditionally been able to say where it happens, like not in a residential zone, maybe in an agricultural zone, and sure, in an industrial zone. Act 13 took that right away. However, several townships and some very great attorneys in Pennsylvania fought that and had it overturned and declared unconstitutional. So it's unconstitutional for the legislature to try to remove that local power. So it was a win in the sense that we've kind of stayed where we are, you know, given that a community is a municipality, incorporated as a municipality, and given that that municipality has local land use zoning, then, you know, they have some right to say where it happens. The industry and politicians are pushing back against that, but we do have that ability. Now, that doesn't mean that a municipality isn't going to get sued when they try to do that. And another thing that communities are doing are passing new local zoning ordinances that specifically ban fracking or fracking waste in specific zones, like residential and agricultural zones. But again, that doesn't mean you're immune to a lawsuit from the industry, and of course, many municipalities don't really have much money, so that puts them in a precarious position. But you know, you work with what you got, so. Sure.
Are there any cases that the industry has sued municipalities that have gone into appeal? Because right now in New York, I can't remember, I think it was Anadarko Drilling. I'm not sure exactly the company, but they sued Middletown and Dryden, 2 towns in New York, and they brought it all the way from the Supreme Court to the Appellate Division to the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York, and they're still reviewing the case. It's taking longer than most cases in the Appellate Division or in the Court of Appeals. So we'll have a decision soon that will create case law throughout the state, of course. But I'm just wondering, is there any kind of court case that's active in Pennsylvania?
I can't point.
Highland Township is one that's erupting right now in terms of injection wells and how they're handling that. Around Penn State, around, what's the name of that town? Where they have the community rights bill.
State College?
But what's the name of is it just State College? So State College, yeah, so they passed that community rights bill, right? And the pipeline company wanted to come through and drill. And that case went through.
No, that never made it to court.
That didn't make it to court,
No.
but that was an example of it working, right? So the
Working
pipeline,
in some regards, right? I mean, they push it outside.
so it went
goes
outside
around.
of
Yes,
that area. So it
exactly.
didn't completely stop it, but it did stop it within that area. And the gas company didn't sue them to make it happen there. But Highland,
Then they worked with the next town over to keep it out there.
Well, in that particular case, Penn State University is converting one of its power plants to natural gas. So they needed to put a pipeline to campus. And rather than put it through their own property, they wanted to route it through residential neighborhood of State College. And the citizens who, and the borough council who put the ordinance into place fought back, and Penn State was like, we don't really care. And I think, yeah, the permits were issued, I believe, and everything was in place. But the citizens in that community vowed to do whatever it took, put all their grannies and children, you know, in the path of the pipeline, and they basically just said, we will not let this happen. So, of course, Penn State, in its infinite wisdom, decided it would be better to just put it through its own property.
Yeah, I mean, the industry's response to dealing with these local ordinances or local bans on fracking was essentially to get Act 13 passed, right? Yeah. And then they did that, and then it got ruled unconstitutional. So they're right now probably strategizing to figure out what they're going to do next.
There's another interesting case happening right now in Elk County, Pennsylvania. So Highland Township passed a local ordinance banning fracking fluid waste in the township. Despite that local law, the EPA issued a permit for an injection well to dispose of fracking fluid waste. Seneca Resources, the company who wants to put in the injection well, is suing the township because they have this local ban and or is threatening to sue the township, but now the township's in a position where it has to defend its own law. So that is a very interesting case that we'll be following too.
Yeah, we're following that pretty close as Public Herald, so keep in touch with us so we can fill you in on it.
But
Yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
To what degree are you getting a open reception from the New York Department of Health and the other people that Governor Cuomo has put in kind of a gatekeeper position as to whether he's going to approve fracking in New York or not, which we all know is certainly not a decision he's going to make before the election. But I would assume that a great deal of the information that you've compiled and arranged in this video presentation should be known by the appropriate authorities in New York, but I wonder if it is.
I would say they're aware of it. They're aware of it. Okay, so the Department of Environmental, was it Conservation, right? The
Yeah, and the
DEC.
Department of Health. He's burning the Department of Health
Yeah.
Right.
as well as the DEC. And of course, they're pointing fingers at each other. But it was kind of an interesting stratagem.
Yeah.
Because we all know that any Department of Environmental Conservation tends to become, over time, a captory of the industry that it's regulating because of the revolving door. The Department of Health certainly has not that much revolving door with the industry because they don't employ many people in Department of Health kind of positions. So it was a strategy that many environmentalists thought was a good thing to do. And I'm just wondering if you guys are monitoring it.
Well, do you have any predictions of who will replace Dr. Shaw? I think he just resigned, right, or was pushed out. So,
Sure.
Any predictions of and it would be interesting to see the legacy or the
Well,
pedigree of that choice.
Well, the only positive note is that most people feel that with $20 or $30 million already in the bank, Cuomo doesn't really need any more of their money. So there's your ultimate question: is that no politician at any level can turn down support by moneyed interests if he needs the money to get elected.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this hinges on if Hillary runs, then he really has no other ambition besides staying governor.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and he'll beat that no problem.
But
Yeah,
I mean, I
he's
don't
set
need
it.
to tell you guys that money
Well, it is
talks in
pretty-
these issues.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, to answer your question about, would they be interested and are they interested? Are they using it? The DEC has been at our screenings in the southern part, along the PA border, and your EPA representatives too that are here in the state have been at those screenings. So they're aware of the film. You might want to ask them maybe why they're not talking about it. We'd be happy to meet with them and talk about it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the senators a lot of the senators are up on all of this.
Cool.
But
I think there's a lot of hope for the New York DEC and their role in this, and the Department of Health. I think that we really should give them the opportunity to do the right thing and and promote that and support that. And I don't think that that comes with compromise for the industry, because where you have attention brought to a particular problem and everything will be fine there, we have to recognize that the infrastructure is all connected, and that highlighting one aspect that might function flawlessly will take that light away from areas like the extraction fields down in West Virginia and Pennsylvania that will burn and burn and burn without anyone noticing them. And that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in, is that in this state and in well-connected and virtually connected regions, we are opening up communications, and the medium that we have through electronic transition is having an effect. But in the hills and hollows of West Virginia and down in those regions where you don't have any connection, there needs to be some sort of organic outreach, and that's what we're trying to provide, to bring real-life experiences to people like here and then present that outwardly to the world. We're not here to destroy anybody's business or ruin an industry. We're here to provide information through credible investigative journalism and scientific investigation and public involvement to say, look, something is really definitely wrong here. And it's not just the chronic and acute effects that people are suffering from. It's the long-term poisoning or transformation of freshwater water resources that, as correctly pointed out in this film, cannot be cleaned if we don't know what's being put in there. It would be absolutely impossible to clean an aquifer of those contaminants. Absolutely impossible. Oh, I'm sorry.
She's got the mic there.
I just wanted to see if you were able to speak more to being called an eco-terrorist. That may not be something you want to talk about, but just along the lines of like what that journey is like, and if you have any advice for other people who may be deemed eco-terrorists.
Never. Go ahead.
First rule of thumb
Yeah.
is never, ever, ever go onto public land at night to take photos by yourself.
Absolutely. Always.
Always know your precise rights. I saw a great little pamphlet in the room where we had community dinner that said, know your rights, and goes over, know your rights as a citizen, a member of the public. Know your rights as a member of the public on public land. And if in the event that someone should refer to you in a formal way with State Department as an eco-terrorist, well, in our case, we didn't take that lightly, and we brought a case against the gas company. First of all, we were really disappointed that the state did nothing about it and brushed it under the rug, because that is a major, major, major issue. You don't get to throw around the word eco-terrorism lightly, especially in states that have upped their ante in terms of the homeland security provisions and laws that have been put into place. I mean, it doesn't take much to be thrown in jail when that word flies around these days. So we have brought a case against the gas company responsible and its subsidiaries to find out precisely what the implications of being called an eco-terrorist are, to whom they referred to us as an eco-terrorist precisely, and who the hell it was that tried to steal our cameras and put me up against the car, because we still have no idea. And those people should not be protected. You should not get to, do stuff like that and get away with it. So it's creepy, to put it in one word, creepy.
We've talked a lot now, and the film talked a lot about the State Department of Environmental Protection, but I'm just curious, like if this place sits on a watershed for like 3 major interstate rivers, like where is the federal government in all of this? Like is the EPA just silent? Are they backing the industry? Like what if anything is being done like on a federal level?
EPA is not silent. Okay, so EPA has come into play here on a number of occasions, and they do what they do best, which is bark loud and act small. Okay, EPA comes in and gets all riled up in 2011 because they have trihalomethanes bubbling up out of the water because the company, these waste treatment facilities that are accepting flowback waste and running it through their system and discharging it into the river is filled with so much bromide and chlorine that it's reacting and creating this chemical and causing a serious problem. The state's doing nothing about it. EPA has to come in and says, you better start doing something about it. And if you don't start doing something about it, we're going to get on you for all this illegal dumping. Because the EPA had in their back pocket all this illegal dumping that was happening in these old mines in Pennsylvania by really high-profile people across the state. So all of a sudden, the state backs off. They make an announcement to say to the companies, we are asking you to not take this waste to these facilities any longer. So it's a voluntary request. So then the waste comes to New York, and it goes to Ohio, and then Ohio experiences all these earthquakes, and that's what happened there. Now the EPA is trying to deal with the earthquake issue. The EPA is infrequent when it comes to actual pollution cases on the sites, like individual pollution cases. They're extremely infrequent. So for instance, Melissa and I have just got done looking at roughly 500 of the permits from 2014 to 2013 for the northern tier. And in those 500 permits, EPA was probably inside of like 6 of them, you know, in terms of pretty benign things, not where they're really supposed to be, right? If the EPA should step in if there's pollution to the waters, right? Navigable waterways get pollution, EPA should be there, number one, and they're not there. So that's one of the big problems that we're seeing, and something that we're trying to figure out on, you know, what to do, how to hold the EPA more accountable so that they have to step into these places and start to do more. I mean, they've been blocking a lot of the testing going on in Pennsylvania too. So the EPA blocked a ton of air quality testing that was supposed to happen at fracked well pads and told these scientists from other states, listen, we're not going to let you go out and test fugitive gas emissions on these fracked well pads. We're not going to let you do that. You can go do it at these abandoned oil and gas wells. So that's what happened. Then all of a sudden, EPA tests these fracked wells this year and says, oh, we found 1,000 times more methane coming off these fracked well pads than we thought was there, right? That science could have been here 2 years ago with these scientists that were coming in Pennsylvania. So they do some good things, and they also do some really poor things, more poor things in my opinion than good.
Do you think it's a similar story to why the DEP is backing off? Is it just kind of the same thing happening at a federal level, or do you think there's any kind of different dynamic explaining it?
Well, I mean, Melissa, you want to hit up the water contamination cases? I mean, the EPA was investigating water contamination cases all across the country for fracking, and then all of a sudden dropped them. So they're no different than the DEP when it comes to how they handle.
That was concurrent with a change of position.
That's
I
true
think
too.
Lisa Jackson was replaced by Gina McCarthy as the administrator, and there was a complete change and reversal of the decision about the responsibilities of the companies to provide water to the people impacted in Dimick, Pavilion, and I think
Texas.
and Dish, was it, or one of the Texas.
Yeah.
So that is something that we have to look at very carefully. I mean, these are our federal oversight, and we need to carefully open up a discussion about why, first of all, those decisions were made to reverse the responsibility of those companies to provide water. That would be something that we would be interested in having answered soon. For me.
I was wondering that just like what happened with the with smoking and also with acid rain, what happened was that you had a coalition of states, and you had the AG office really start to look at litigation of pollution and effect of health with their state. Do you see that might be an area where there might be some restitution, or that this will then come up by having New York, and I'm not sure about Pennsylvania, but Ohio, Colorado, see as a coalition of that these are multiple effects that are happening everywhere, just like they had in smoking and in acid rain.
I think if the public was in charge of that, and if we could all bring together an interstate effort and go to the AG, we have a much better chance of that than our elected officials in those various states. There are great elected officials that probably would be totally into that, and maybe they are talking to each other. I'm not aware of that, but maybe they are. But I think if there's enough public pressure, anything can happen.
The industry recognizes the effectiveness of coalitions as well, you know, and they've created their own. So there is one that was recently created in Pittsburgh with help from the Heinz Foundation, which had a bunch of controversy, where that coalition was going to give a set of standards to the industry for them to operate within these best management practices, which is going to be kind of like above and beyond the laws and that kind of thing, to help it put this coating on the process to make it look like it was better. Everybody was operating with better practices and these things were being taken care of. So I guess I'm saying it's good to pay attention to not just the coalitions that are being established in good ways, in positive ways, dealing with these problems, but these fabricated ones too, that are trying to sweep these problems under the rug even further and minimize some of the work that you might be talking about doing.
There is a collection of U.S. senators who have come together to petition the government, the EPA, to reopen its water contamination investigations in Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wyoming. Yeah. So there is that. But as far as like getting the AG, Department of Justice to investigate the way it did the tobacco industry, I haven't heard of that yet.
PEPA might do that too, so you should keep an eye on PEPA.
People's Environmental Protection Agency.
There's something happening there.
To what degree is the debate ever going to get to the point where you've got to trade off the best environmental practices for fracking, but in the context of appropriate incentives for solar and wind to replace everything that's been extracted over the next 20 years? A real holistic approach, because it seems like it's always difficult because people like yourselves are absolutely against fracking.
No, we don't come out with a position against it.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
So we're, as journalists, we're just here to inform the public about what it is that we found, but we don't come out for or against it. Okay. So.
But I would assume that you could come out for renewable, like solar and wind, et cetera.
We could.
Yeah. But
after you investigate it, I mean, there's lots to be investigated there, and in
right.
fact,
I mean,
there are
there's impacts from those too.
Well, I mean, we've been. I mean, personally, I've been, writing about these renewable energies since 2008. So it's not something that we haven't been paying close attention to, and actually working with organizations on. So we have an opinion about it.
Sure.
But as you've pointed out, the fracking debate has pushed a lot of these other issues and a lot of the more holistic approaches to the problem off the public debate space, because everybody that gets emotionally involved or scientifically challenged or economically enticed tends to jump into the processes that have cash flow, like fracking. So it tends to push that off the shelf.
Right. Absolutely.
Do you see any climate where that can be, the two can be combined? In other words, all right, all you oil and gas guys, you want this. Will you accept these incentives for the permissions that you're looking for?
Well, there are probably, we hear that there are many subsidies already enjoyed by the carbon, industry.
Extraction industry.
Yeah, carbon extraction industry. That might just be well served just to divert that toward the development of renewable energy and give it a fighting chance. That would be one thing to level. It is getting there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And there's been analysis of, for instance, New York State going completely renewable and independent in the next 12 to 20 years, and that's a possibility. And that's one of the reasons why I'm quite happy to be a professor here at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in the Civil Environmental Engineering Department, where students and forward-thinking professors are stepping up and really want to contribute to this and really to demonstrate that this can be done. Not just demonstrate it, contribute to what needs to be done for us to continue as a species. So fossil carbon is meant to be kept in the ground. not to be injected into our atmosphere to fundamentally transform everything that we know on the surface.
I think Yuri's talking more along the lines of like energy policy at this
Yeah.
point, as opposed to incentives for creating alternative energy. So if you have 100% renewable energy being established in New York State, that doesn't prevent fracking from happening in New York State 10 years down the road, right? If fracking is a profitable industry 10 years down the road and it can be extracted and exported to another market, then the companies will certainly do that. I mean, right now the discussion in DC is using our gas, using Americans' gas, to leverage against Ukraine's debt to Russia. It's not like this is something that is going to be strictly within American borders, right? A resource that's strictly within American borders. It's a resource that can be extracted and sold within the global market, and if there's a profit for it, then that's what will happen, unless you have an energy policy that prevents it. So, I mean, you gotta be realistic. If you have 100% renewable energy, it doesn't prevent fracking. Yeah.
Hey, one more question, I think, one or two more questions, and then we'll stick around in the back afterward too, so.
Maybe that's it.
Maybe that's the last one.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a little bit not topic oriented, but just the fact that you guys went from not being journalists to forming a journalist organization, correct?
No, we were both journalists.
We were both journalists,
okay.
but we
teamed up.
teamed up and formed our own Public Herald.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And what was the process there? And what was the hardest part of going ahead and doing just that?
Her saying, yes, I want to do a documentary. That was the hardest part. No. Resources, right? So financing. It wasn't that we had limited ideas or places to go investigate and report on. It was whether or not we had enough money and support to do it. So as we started Public Herald and reached out to the public about the work that we were doing, people began to become members of our organization and help us to continue our reporting. So everything that we've done with Public Herald is completely publicly funded. The film was 100% publicly funded. All of our investigations are still 100% publicly funded, and they continue to do so. So, if you donated and got a copy tonight, that goes to our investigative work. But I'd say that was for me anyway, with Melissa and Public Herald, that was one of our hardest things to get past was financial resources and it giving us the opportunities that we needed to cover the story thoroughly.
Because we did everything ourselves, obviously, it completely consumed our lives.
That's true too.
Because we were reporting and doing research. We were starting a nonprofit and crowdsourcing our own funding. Designing a brand, building our own website. I mean, it was insane. It still is crazy.
Video editing.
And so my personal relationships suffered. I think that was the other thing that was hard for me. Now that the film is out and stuff, I'm finally college friends that have had, tons of kids and gotten married since during the production of Triple Divide. I can now get to know your children and talk to you because I have time on my hands, a little bit anyway. But
I thought I heard these guys say, well, what's next?
Well, we are starting a new project too, yeah.
We're going to talk about that.
So it's just all consuming. I mean, you're all in when you're starting out, but it's getting better. I mean, we're starting to get out there more and be noticed by organizations like the Knight Foundation and things like that. So
the hardest thing for me
better
personally was to leave the work that I was doing in Ohio. And what we were doing there with our local economies, local food economies, that was really difficult to walk away from. But, there were so many red flags with fracking and questions that weren't being answered. It was impossible to go to sleep at night and know that stuff wasn't being looked at. I covered Superfund sites and brownfield sites in Ohio, so I had a pretty good idea of what you're supposed to be doing with these waste streams, and I could see all these red flags with those waste streams in Ohio and with potential contamination. So you couldn't not come cover it. But to leave what we were doing in Ohio was my biggest personal struggle.
Yeah, I mean, Josh was building a local food movement and culture in where he was in Ohio. And let's say he'd stayed and done that, and then fracking came in. I mean,
Yeah.
he was working on a local certification process to build local food market value. But when fracking comes in next to an organic farm, you're gonna lose all that. So
as I was telling Ben, who's here from the farmery, who's working on a grocery system, we had a $300,000 loan on the table to start a local grocery system. I had to walk away from that, so that was a big deal for me. Yeah.
But you can always go back.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making this film. Frankly,
Thanks, man.
I'm really overwhelmed by the content of it, and I thought I'd actually ask an aesthetic question that no one really has commented on, the quality of the film. I presume this is the first film that you folks have made, and I think the quality is also overwhelming, but in a positive
Thank you.
sense. And I was really struck. We didn't get to see the entire credits, but it seemed as though very few people actually worked on the film. And you said before that this was all, publicly financed, and you did to sacrifice your personal life to do this. And I even saw, I think, your name on some of the music. Was that correct? Or somebody's name was on the.
She's on that. So
you're the
song,
first person in over a year to notice that.
And over here.
I mean, just the music. There was a little bit of Holst, but other than that, it seemed as though I don't know who the other composer was,
Nest.
but
Nest. So we should give Nest
An
credit.
amazing
Yes.
band called Nest.
okay. Are they people that you know? And
No, we found them on great music website called Free Music Archive. So all royalty free.
But we did pay for half their songs.
We did pay for another album of theirs that.
But it
required
was
licensing.
so well suited. I mean, I think if you had to listen to a soundtrack of it, it would probably unnerve a lot of people. But that's exactly what your film was doing. But I mean, another thing that really struck me was the typography and the way you've kind of mimicked the periodic table of elements, and a lot of the maybe B-roll or whatever was almost like symbolic, like the dropping of the paper into the water and everything. I mean, it's not really a question, but if you have anything to comment on, where that inspiration came from. I usually think about like films like this that have a slick quality, and it's the first time that there's like a producer that came in and added all that shit afterwards, after they're like, oh, they have a good story, let's pour money into it. But it seems as though that hasn't happened with you folks, that was there from the start.
So Josh, in a former lifetime, and he still is an artist, okay? And I am former lifetime, right? No, he's currently an artist too.
Yeah.
And I am a singer and songwriter, and I've been in bands in the past, so we both brought that to the table too. Yeah. And we did do everything ourselves. However, like we said, we are completely publicly funded. We crashed on a lot of couches with family and friends for a very long time, and used their electricity and their hot water. So we have all of them as part of our crew. We used my mom and my brothers as actors in the Landman chapter. So there was free talent, and Mark Ruffalo, of course, donated his time too, which is cool. As far as the aesthetic. Some of it was very, very planned, and other parts of it were just like, holy crap, we have no money. How the F are we going to do this? Like the chalkboard scenes. We were like, we can't hire an animator. So, how are we going to illustrate this? And so Josh is like, well, my Uncle Jeff has a large concrete basement wall. Why don't we just, paint it with blackboard chalk paint and give it a go. So,
yeah, that's what we did.
Like 2 weeks and many long sessions
what are you doing down there?
Arguing with each other later. It turned out pretty good.
But the idea too, I mean, like, just we were consciously unaware of the fact that doing the blackboard presentation with chalk is a much more like tangible way of understanding a subject as opposed to doing the computer animation. At least from my perspective, Melissa and I are both literature majors, so like metaphors and all that stuff is a big deal. And and the idea of the stage and the audience, right? So the audience seems to be more removed from the stage when you do computer animation.
Yeah.
But when you use these tangible things like the maps and the watercolors, you're bringing that audience closer to the stage, in my opinion. So
It's much more intimate, yeah.
yeah, totally.
Bravo. I think it was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, as a matter of
Glad you
fact.
liked it. Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks, Yuri.